Okay, yesterday we were learning about Kisei Shel Eliyahu, one chair, two chairs, why we have Kisei Shel Eliyahu. Okay, then we started talking about what's called Sandikois, the one that holds the baby. So that is, in a certain respect, halachically, it's even greater than the actual mohel that does the bris. Because he's actually holding the baby and helping along with the bris. So, and not only that, the sandik is like, we said, the poskim Shchnarch says, he's likened to the person that brings the ketores, the kohen that brings the ketores. So it's a very holy thing. So sandik is a very holy thing. Now some people say it's preferred that the father of the child should be the sandik. Some people say not necessarily. Once you honor somebody to be a sandik, you shouldn't change your mind and give it to somebody else. Unless if there's a really, really good reason, like we learned about changing Moyalim, you didn't think the person was going to be there, he's a family member, a more prominent person, whatever. We also learned that we started discussing about if you could be sandik more than one for more than one child of the same family. So normally it says in halacha, in many places, you don't be a sandik twice to the same family. But again, there's exception to it. The grandfather, the father, out of prominent person, their mekel, grandparents, their mekel, that they could be even twice in the same family. Now, from Rabbi Yosef it says you really shouldn't, but the world does not make machmir on that aspect of Rabbi Yosef. And in fact, there's an interesting question. Who gets the first? Let's say there's a father and mother had a child, okay? The mother wants her father to be sandik, and the father of the baby wants his father to be sandik. So as presidents, the paternal or maternal grandfather. So there's two opinions in halacha, believe it or not. Some say the first one goes, in fact, they bring it down, it's also connected to the name. They bring it down to the bottom because it's an interesting thing, by the way. Who has a right to the first name? A couple has a baby, okay? So a lot of times they just agree on a name. It's obvious who the name is going to be. But what happens if they don't agree? Halachically, who has the rights to the first name? Obviously you have to alternate, father, mother, mother, father. But who has the first right to the first name? So it's glad that in last week's parsha, in last week's parsha, in Parshas Vayeshev, the Rebbe writes about it. Somebody asked in the Kutasichas in the back. Somebody asked the Rebbe a question: who has the first name to the baby, the father's name or the mother's name? So the Rebbe brings down in Parshas Vayeshev. There's a Daskenim Milah Taisis, was from the Rishonim. If you look by the in Einon. Parshas Vayeshev, when Yehuda after Mechiras Chametz, after Mechiras Yosef, so it says like this: Yehuda left the brothers. He married Bashua. Okay, and then it says like this: Vatar vateled bein. She became pregnant, had a son. Vayikra Eshmei. He called his name Er. Vatar Eidbein, she had another son. Vatikra Eshmei Einon. She called the second son Einon. So the Daskerim Valatesis and that pasuk in Vayeshev brings down that the custom in those days, the father got the first name, then the mother, then the father, and so on. So the Rebbe writes, in a place where there is no custom, that's the way it should be done, like the Daskerim Valatesis says. But the fact is, in most places, by the way, the minig is that the mother gets the first name. Unless if there's somebody just passed away from the other side. But so generally, the minig in the world, usually in most places, is the mother gets the first name. Why? Because she carried the baby for 9 months and the husband has a very hard time. Like in the delivery room, the husband has a very hard time. But bottom line is the custom is usually that the woman gets the first name, not the husband. But by a sandik, I tell people it's a very simple, practical thing to do. I mentioned it not long ago. What happens if the wife wants her father and the father wants his father? So what do? So you let God decide. How do you let Hashem decide? You make a girdle, you make a lottery, but you have to make a Torah lottery. A Torah lottery is different than a regular lottery. You can't just put maternal, paternal, name in a bowl and pick out one name. And that's the winner of the lottery. It's not a Torah lottery. Torah lottery is you have two bowls. One says, let's say the two grandfathers are Reuven and Shimon. So you have the two grandfathers, Reuven and Shimon, in one pot, in one bowl. Another bowl you have two papers, Zacha or Lo Zacha. Merits or doesn't merit. Then you pick one name from one bowl and one name from a different bowl, and then you see what it is. That's the Torah lottery. Otherwise, according to halacha, it's not called a proper lottery. Lottery, according to Torah, you can't just put both names in a hat and pick out one. You have to have two hats, both names in one, Zocha, Lo Zocha, merit or not, doesn't merit in the other, and then you pick one of each, and that's the way the Torah lottery is. So I told people a lot of times, and it worked. I mean, you have no choice, let God decide. So they decide, hopefully they'll have more children, so the other grandfather will do it. But as they say in Sfarim, one thing is for sure, it's not a good idea to fight over it. Because fighting is worse than everything else. So people should never fight, believe it or not. Huh? What? People are people. Part of the definition of a human being is we fight. That's the... Yeah, I'm not saying anything. Okay, now even somebody in the middle of Shiva, God forbid he's in the middle of sitting Shiva for a parent or a relative, halachically he's allowed to be sandik, but it's better not to ask him to begin with. Okay, that we said. Okay, you give it to... By Sfardim, it's very interesting. By Ashkenaz, we don't have this. If you notice by a Sephardic bris, after the bris, they all line up to get brachot from the sandik, from the one that held the baby by the bris. In Ashkenazic communities, it's not done. But in Sephardic communities, it's a minhag that they have, that they all get a bracha from the sandik. He sits in the chair where he held the baby and he gives out the blessings for everybody. It's an interesting custom. Now, the question is, can a male be a sandik or not? At
the same time, doing water and the sandik?
Yeah. It's interesting. The Munkachir, the Minchas Salazar, was a male. So it's brought down in Sfarim that the Munkachir did bris and he was a male and sandik at the same time. He held the baby and he did the bris. Now some poskim don't like that because when the male makes the brachas and mitzvahs, you're supposed to say standing. So if the male is the sandik, so he's sitting, holding the baby. So in order to make the bracha ala Milah, he's really supposed to stand. So some poskim say the Pri Megadim says you shouldn't do it. Other people say you could do it. Another opinion says you shouldn't do it because then you're like bundling mitzvahs together. There's one mitzvah to be the mohel, one mitzvah is to be the sandik, and now you're mixing it into one mishmash, one person instead of two. But other people say that he could be a sandik. Because he says if there's a reason to sit, you're allowed to sit and whatever. Okay, now it's also appropriate that a mohel and the sandik, if they can, they go to the mikveh the day of the bris, but also they should wear Shabbos clothing at the bris. The father of the child, the mohel, the sandik, they're all supposed to wear Shabbos clothing at the time of a bris. If they didn't, they didn't. But, you're supposed to really do it. As we mentioned, it's interesting. It's a very big thing to be a sandik. There are many people, they still do, by the way, they pay big bucks to be sandik. They'll come over to a father of the baby, let's say, that's not very wealthy. And they'll say, I'll pay for the whole, people do this today, I'll pay for the whole bris, let me be sandik. The parents don't have any money, so okay, they'll give them sandik, at least the bris is paid for. It's a very important thing to, and also it says, it's a custom that the sandik gives a baby gift to the baby. That's the different customs. What? Who says it? Migdalemek, because, why? I'll tell you why, they bring a proof for it. When Avram Avinu did his bris, he was 99 years old, Avram Avinu did a bris. Who was the sandik? So it says in the Medrash, it says in the Medrash, Hashem was the sandik. Now, what happened right after the bris? Hashem told him, I'm giving you the land of Eretz Yisrael as a gift. So you see from there, Hashem was a sandik, and right away he gave away a gift to the baby. Avram Avinu was.
Who was the boy?
Avram. So it says, the Medrash says, Rashi quotes this part of the Medrash. The Medrash says Avram Avinu did a bris on himself. See, he said to Hashem. Don't forget, Hashem was there holding this is the sandik. So he said to Hashem, this is what the Medrash says. Hashem said, Avram Avinu said to Hashem, I'm an old man, handshake a little bit. So Hashem says, that's why we say, V'choreis imei habris. It's every day in davening, V'choreis imei habris. Hashem did with him the bris. The Medrash says, that Hashem said, don't worry, I'm going to hold your hand, and they cut it together. That's what he says, V'choreis imei habris, right after Mitzosas Levavai. So that Hashem helped him with the bris. Yeah, but Hashem is a little bit different category. Okay, now, what happens at the actual bris is like this. You're supposed to wash, make sure the baby is clean before the bris, even Shabbos. You dress him up with nice clothing. Even the community, many people have a minute, they come to a bris, they get dressed up Shabbos-tic, you light candles, but then nowadays we have lights. Now, the minhag is, like we said, the mother of the baby gives the baby to the kvater, the couple that brings in the baby, and then everybody says they stand there until the end of the bris. Now, therefore, it's like this. Some people have a custom that they'll stand for the duration of the bris, not for the party. I'm saying for the actual mitzvah. They'll stand, but it says in halacha if they can't, it's hard for them to stand, then they're allowed to sit. But the idea they would stand. So now the kvater, again, the couple that brings in the baby, they bring into the baby to the opening of the doorway of the shul, and then they take the baby and they call Kol Ram. The male calls out usually Baruch Haba, meaning we're welcoming the baby, we're welcoming Eliyahu, and the male reads Baruch Haba, and so on and so forth. Now there's another interesting machlekes between the Bais Yosef and the Ramah, and therefore there's a Rambam and other Rishonim, and therefore there's a big difference in a very important thing in a bris between Ashkenazim and Sfardim. The question is, why don't you, by Sfardim they do, but the question in halacha is, why don't you say Shechianu? The father's doing a mitzvah, right? It's a mitzvah on the father. He can't cut, he's not a moil, so he makes the shliach, he makes the moil, his shliach, his agent, to do the bris. But the father makes the But the question is, why don't you say Shechianu? It's a very important mitzvah. And by Sfardim, they make a Shechianu at a bris milah. Ashkenazim make by opinion aben. Everybody makes by opinion aben. The same thing you have when a sheichet does shchita. Okay, so there's a bracha, believe it or not. When a sheichet starts the first shchita, he makes a bracha sheketshanim and says tzvanu ala shchita. So it says, why doesn't he make a shechianu? So over there by Hilchot Shchita it says that the reason why you don't make a shechianu is because there's pain for the animal. The animal is in pain, you're killing it, it's in pain. So the same thing it says by a bris, because the baby's in pain, the baby cries. In fact, part of the mitzvah of a bris is the baby should feel the pain. It's an interesting shaila in halacha, not by adults. By adults, that the old Russians that do bris and you have to do anesthesia. But there's an interesting shaila in halacha, are you allowed to give even a local anesthesia to a baby that they shouldn't feel the pain of the bris? And halacha says you're not allowed to. Because an adult doing a bris on an adult, the guy will... So,
He can hit you back.
not even he can hit you back. It was too painful. It's much more painful by an adult than it is by a kid.
So maybe do a half anesthesia.
No. They don't do anesthesia. So anyway, so by a kid, it says in halacha you really shouldn't do anesthesia because part of the mitzvah is to feel the pain. So therefore, in Ashkenazic circles, the Ramah writes, you don't make a shechianu by a bris milah because tsar the yanuka. There's pain of the kid. By Ashkenazim, the Rambam writes that even though there's tsar, but bris milah is such a holy thing, so you still make a shechianu. So that's why Sfardim, the Bais Din also writes that you make a shechianu. So Sfardim, interestingly, make a shechianu at a bris, and Ashkenazim don't. Universally. Sfardim make a shechianu at a bris, and Ashkenazim don't. They pass like the Ramah that you don't, and what?
Leather garments also?
What?
Leather garments.
That's why there's a whole question, do you make a shechianu? It's not for now. There's a whole question, do you make shechianu on leather garments? Because, again, on shoes you don't make a shechianu. Even those that make a shechianu on garments don't make on shoes. Why? Because an animal was killed to get the leather. So again, there's pain to the animal, so you don't make a shechianu. Anybody saying Kaddish?